real proud of our guys, where we're at as a team, not just because we've won, but because of the way that they're learning to prepare, their fearlessness of opportunities, and the growth that we've shown from the first day of practice to where we're at today. Real proud of them for that. With all that said, we're 6-0. That's better than any alternative you can give me after 6 games. But at the same time is irrelevant for game number 7. 6-0 doesn't help you win number 7 in any way, shape, or fashion. So we've got our work cut out for us. Vermont's a very good basketball team. They were our nemesis in my time in the America East at Northeastern. We beat them once, but they were just impossible to beat. Very disciplined basketball. Hard game to play, especially coming off the 2 we just played. But we'll see. We're excited about who we're becoming as a team. Our guys are fun to coach, and I hope it continues that way later on today at practice.
Do you think the nice starts this program has gotten off to the last few years will help your guys keep this in perspective?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not that big of a history guy. Yeah. I think Senderis and them. Heck, I walked in the locker room after the Syracuse game, and the young guys were ecstatic, and Senderis and Dwayne and them were like, "Yo, dude, settle down, man. This is awesome, but this isn't the final leg of the race here." The older guys, all those guys have been through it, including PJ and Chris. Person that doesn't, we don't speak about him anymore because he's not in uniform out there trying to play. And Brian Steele, Brian Steele was in that locker room with those guys when we weren't any good. And Brian Steele was in that locker room last year as a player that couldn't play because of injury. And now he's still a student, and he's in that locker room as a guy that those guys trust as he's making his transition to coaching. And there's a lot of power there from all those guys to say the right things and act the right way. How the young guys handle it, we're going to find out here real soon. I got no idea. All those young guys think that because we practiced good the day before the Syracuse game, that we get to take a day off today. I'm sure that's what they're thinking. That's what they all do. It's no different. But it's up to the leadership of our team to approach things the right way and keep us grounded. And that's where I have an advantage now that I didn't have a couple years ago. I have guys on the team that understand that I can connect with and keep them on point on the message.
Okay. You talked about Vermont. Obviously, Coach Becker, I think 5 years, 521 seasons, and 5 postseason bursts. Just, how impressive is that, and what kind of challenge does that present, having that kind of experience?
Yeah, and if you go back to before him, you got Mike Lonergan, who went to the NCAA tournament and had an unbelievable run at Vermont. And if you go before him, Tom Brennan. Tom stepped down. That's when I was leaving the America East. They were winning 24, 5 games every year. And winning games in the NCAA tournament. It's a very proud program. Has an unbelievable fan following. They've figured out a niche as to who to recruit, where to recruit from, and obviously they have a winning culture in place. And Coach has done an unbelievable job in continuing that, and now adding his own flavor to it. And just watching them on film last night and earlier today. They're impressive. They're a very good basketball team. We've got our work cut out for us.
Coach, I know it's early in the season, but when the polls come out later, I would expect South Carolina to be in the top 25. What type of statement do you think this team made early in the season by beating Syracuse and Michigan? 20th. There you go.
We're 20th.
20th by the AP.
Can you ask me again? Because I got distracted with the fact that you pulled out your Cubs hat that I haven't seen in 4 years.
No, in all fairness, my uncle bought it for me as a gift for Thanksgiving.
I'm with
I said,
you.
you know what?
You.
I'm going to wear the gift, and it matches the shirt, the sweater I'm wearing, so it works out. Coach, again, for this team, what type of statement do you think you guys have made? You're now in the top 25 after beating 2 schools that were in it this past week. So what type of early season statement has South Carolina made to the rest of the country?
I don't know. The whole thing is, everything is about being in the right place in March as a basketball team. I hope we get there. I hope when March rolls around that, like last year, we set a school record for wins. We've been back and forth on this about last year. It's all about putting yourself in a place to be the best that you can be at the end of the year. I thought our guys last year did that. At the end of the day, they said it wasn't good enough. I've never seen a team get penalized for being undefeated in non-conference basketball. Never in my life. It was like we committed the biggest sin in the world because we didn't lose. And it was unbelievable the way that was held against us last year. What's that rhetoric going to be in March? I got no idea. Will we be in the conversation for that to even be important? I have no idea. I hope it is. Anytime you beat a team that went to the Final Four last year, that's got a guy who won 950 games. Anytime you beat a team that was in the national championship game, was it 3 years ago? 3 years ago? And is led by John Beilein and returns 7 starters, like I said. Your guys are doing something right. I'm happy for our fans. I'm happy for our players. That they're being rewarded for our fans for their commitment to help our guys, our players for all the work. Ty Johnson and Michael and all those guys have been through here that helped us when people didn't have time to talk about South Carolina basketball. Heck, I couldn't get you guys to talk about South Carolina basketball. And those kids' sacrifice during those times to now give us the confidence to be able to play these kind of games and win. That's awesome. That's great. I don't want my guys wrapped up in that. I want them to approach things as if we're still the nobodies. Because if we start trying to handle success like saying, oh, we're good, our guys, they haven't figured that one out yet. So we have to stay on edge, have to stay on point, have to stay on the things that matters, which is focus on ourselves and what we have to do every day.
Coach, with the ranking of number 20, given the success that your team has had, do you feel like this team, even though you want them to have kind of the underdog mentality, do you feel like this team is playing as one of the 20 best teams in the country right now?
I don't know. I really don't. I know they're playing very hard for me right now. I know they're trying their hardest. And it didn't start 3 weeks ago. It didn't start after the Monmouth game. This started as soon as last year ended. Our guys in the offseason, the returning guys, were phenomenal. The practices for the trip to Costa Rica, which, by the way, I'm going to say it again. I said it after the game up in New York. So thankful for Ray Tanner for allowing us to do that, because that costs a lot of money, for allowing us to do that. That gave our players an ability to start creating an identity for who they are. It allowed Sindarius to start leading. It allowed Dwayne to start putting his own voice into things. It gave PJ a platform to separate from last season. It gave Chris Silva something he can start establishing himself as a player that has going to have a new role than the one he had last year. Hassani and Mike, 2 guys that are helpful right now. They're both playing their hearts out to help us. Those practices allowed us to understand them as people. All those things, those kids have been great, and they've been great all preseason. I look at it the other way. I don't know if we're playing as well as the top 20 team in the country. I know we've won some real good games. Louisiana Tech, very good basketball team. Holy Cross, NCAA team. Michigan, Syracuse away from home, which, by the way, was a road game. We've won some real good games. We've beaten some real good teams. I think we can be so much better. I think we're not even like even near what we can eventually become as a team. Does that mean we're going to be top 20? Does that mean we're going to be top 10? Does that mean we're going to be, what was it last year, the 69th team in the country? I got no idea. I just know that I really like our guys. I liked them in the summer. I liked them in September. I like them today, and I hope that that we stay connected to who we are. That means that we'll like it in March too. What's that mean? I don't know, but that's all I care about.
You'll obviously learn a lot this week about how your team reacts to those two big victories this past week. But what did you learn about them on the court going against two top 20 opponents?
Yeah, I can tell you this. Obviously on the court, I'm learning about how good we can be defensively, and here's we're not making open shots right now. We're making a shot here and there. We're getting the right shots for the right guys, and the ball's not going in the basket right now. And we're still playing fairly good defense. I'll tell you one thing that I really learned about our team, which really allows me to feel real good about them. During that Syracuse game, there were 3 different instances where in basically a road environment, and you're playing a very good basketball team, they came at us, and they made a couple pushes, and our guys never once flinched. Not one time did they flinch. Sindarius was unbelievable. Dwayne, PJ, they all responded with the next play and allowed us to end up winning that game. That's the character of these guys, the commitment that they have to the work that they've put into one another. That's one thing that's jumped out at me as a coach after 6 games, is it now? 6? Jeez. We're 6 games in already. But, John, that's the one thing that, especially, the Michigan game, we're at home, so it's a little different. But when you're in front of, I don't know how many people were at that game, but, if there was 10,000, 9,750 had orange. That was pretty impressive from our guys.
Coach, you kind of talked about it saying that the rankings really don't mean anything right now, and I know it's a long season, but does that get brought up at the next practice at all and be like, hey, don't worry about that, or do you even bring it up at all?
I don't speak to our team when people think our team stinks. Hey, people think we stink. We got to go be better because of that. I'm not going to speak to them, hey, people think we're good. They're going to find out. Heck, you don't think they're going to be on their phones reading social media with everyone telling them, how good they are and blah, 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 and all that other stuff. And all of a sudden there's going to be media requests from people that they have no idea who they are asking to visit with them on whatever interviews. So it's part of the deal. I got to speak to them about handling that moment, but we do that all the time. That's not kind of going back to the math club. It's not about just teaching when you get to a certain moment. You're always teaching. You're always in communication with them about good and bad and indifference. And you're always trying to engage them so they're prepared best they can be for when they experience something for the first time. Here's the positive for us. We beat Iowa State up there in New York 2 years ago, and I want to say after that game we either ranked 25th or people were starting to say, oh, wow. Well, we started like 1-6 in league play. No one ever spoke about South Carolina basketball again for the rest of that year. Guys on this team were on that team. Last year we cracked the rankings, and people were speaking about us. And here's what's sad, that even after winning 11 league games, people still said, meh. So our guys really have learned not to pay attention to that stuff. It is what it is. It's whether it, excuse the word, but whether it pisses me off or not about the lack of respect for the work our kids do is all irrelevant. It's irrelevant. The commitment is not us to pollsters or voters. Our commitment is me to them players to each other, them players to our coaches, our staff to each other, to challenge one another internally to become the best that we can be every single day. That's where we try to keep our message at all the time.
Coach, you hinted on it just a few minutes ago about the defensive side of the ball for you guys. The younger guys seem to have really bought into how aggressive you guys like to play and switch, off ball screens and that sort of thing. How are you able to get this team to play with so much consistency on that side of the ball where everyone seems to be in constant communication to make it really tough for the opposition?
This summer, You know, if you think about the two first-year guys that are helping us the most, Hassani and Mike. Well, those are the two guys that were able to partake in every workout this summer. The rest of the guys are all returning players. So you have a basis, a foundation of to where to start at. I know you guys don't think this happens, but 4 years ago, I tried to teach the same things defensively. The problem is that we had guys that didn't believe in it. They basically were like, can't play like this. Well, you and I are going to have a problem then, and now we don't have that thought process anymore. You got Senderis and Dwayne and Justin, guys that got here, and as freshmen, I said, this is how we need to play. They never doubted in it. They tried to go do it, and they've grown in it. They understand how to watch film now. They're stronger. They're better athletes. They don't get wrapped up in the emotion of a good play or a bad play. So there's an experience factor there. When you then couple in Hassani and Mike understanding stuff that we do because of those summer practices in those games, you have a more prepared team. Then the other guys, they got to practice against those guys every single day. And when they see their discipline and their approach every day, what are they going to do? Start complaining? They're going to stick out like a sore thumb. So they're forced to compete at a high level in practice. That's when you guys hear me talk about practice all the time. That's where you get better. You get better in practice. You don't get better in games. Practice is 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Games, you might play 26 minutes if you're a real good player. Games is about building confidence for your team. Practice is where you get better at. Those guys now don't have an out because the top 6, 7, 8 guys, they practice at a high rate. So it makes the first-year guys have to really kind of join the party, or they're going to be left outside watching from the street. And last time I checked, everyone wants to be at the party. Nobody wants to be outside looking at the party, and that's the kind of mindset that our guys have created.
I had a question about Mike. I mean, he started all 6 games, averaging over 21 minutes. Just how impressed have you been with his particular development and ability to come in and give you a lot of minutes?
Yeah, he's been great. We had a lot of guys to kind of choose from, and some guys have been hurt. Some guys weren't here for the summer when we had those practices. It is what it is. Bottom line is, when the first day everyone reports, everyone's in square one. And Mike's proven himself to be very trustworthy. He understands what we do. He's got an unbelievable commitment to play for the team. He was so nervous before the Syracuse game. The first 2 or 3 possessions of that game, he was so wound up. But to see him just kind of take a step back and trust in who we were and in what we had tried to prepare him to do, and then excel the way he did as that game progressed, was phenomenal. I didn't just put like names in a piece of paper and put them in a hat. All right, Mike's going to be our starter. He earned it. He earned it, and he earned it by his commitment to working and doing what we do, and give him a lot of credit. He's out there with experienced guys, which, by the way, makes his job a little easier because the guys around him are all so connected with what we try to do.
I think it was after the Monmouth game. You said you needed more from Mike offensively. He had he made 6 shots his first 3 games total. Since then, he's made 18. What kind of clicked for him offensively?
Just getting more comfortable, but it's a big part of it. Big part of it. Michigan at home, him and Chris combined for 20 points and I want to say like 14 rebounds or something like that. That's big-time contribution from a sophomore and a freshman. Guys that are trying to find their way in college basketball. Mike really understands how to play. I'm starting to understand him more as a player too. That's a big part. And I say it over and over because it's important. It's not just a player understanding our system. It's coaches understanding the player, how they learn, how to communicate with them so you can better engage them as to what you need from them. And then obviously games under their belts, what I just said. Constant repetition in practice, getting better, and then going out in a game and actually doing it. gives him and the team confidence about what he can become and we can become. And we're going through that right now.
One or two more on the basketball side of things.
Coach, you mentioned Sin and Dwayne after the Syracuse win in the locker room, just telling everybody to chill out a little bit. What was it like to see that out of them, the way they were embracing success, and what does that tell you about this team and how they can embrace future successes? You guys keep working at it this year.
Yeah, that's as a coach. I mean, I know there's this whole perception of me of being this Grinch that just loves misery, and when I walked in there, I was prepared to try to diffuse guys from being too excited. But when I walked in, I smiled, and I was able to let my guard down because Sin and Dwayne and Justin and them were so grounded with the moment, and that allowed me to kind of say, you know what, we're going to be all right. We're going to be all right because we got guys, and it's the right guys. It's not guys that just decided to speak today because we beat Syracuse. It's the guys that speak every single day that have guided our guys every single day, not just this year, but for 4 years. And it was kind of a neat feeling to walk in that locker room and see so much joy, but at the same time, the right people speaking, which are the players, about what the next step is, and that was powerful.
Alex, did you have a question? We'll give Alex the last.
I can tell that we got ranked because this thing hasn't stopped. I'm gonna throw this away, and it's not Gunner either. Holy cow!
Coach, how do you compare your bigs that you've got this year to Mendogas and Chetkavich's at this level when they first came?
You know what's interesting, Alex, is our bigs this year, offensively, they're trying to figure it out. Mendogas and Limones had concepts on how to play offensively, yet defensively and physically, they weren't physically ready, and we're talking about their freshman year, to be able to compete athletically against high-level opponents. And then defensively in our concepts, how we try to defend and get out there and see, everyone wants to play small ball now. Everyone wants to play small. And by small ball, it doesn't mean size. It means guys that can actually play away from the rim. Well, if you got 6'9", 6'10" guys that can't move their feet and they just play inside the paint, it becomes difficult to play the way we play. All these freshmen can really move their feet, and they're physically more prepared to athletically go out there and move their feet and guard a ball screen and not get dribble driven once somebody tries to pick and pop or whatever actions they run to play through their bigs, because that's what most people do to us to defeat our ball pressure. They run us into high ball screens, or they run their bigs up, throw it to them, and then try to have their bigs create offense for them. And we always, is kind of a tug of war because of some of the limitations athletically that Limones had and Mendogas to a certain extent. These guys, they're better defenders out there. Now we as coaches have to do a better job of getting them to the right places offensively. And them as players have to keep working at understanding the structure that we have on offense so then they can be aggressive. And Mike is getting it. Chris has real good moments, and then he has moments where he kind of goes back to that raw athlete. And you know this better than anyone in this room. You're not going to score baskets on raw athleticism. You got to understand how to do things and when to do them. And he's so much better now than he was a year ago. But that's the biggest difference. And I just told our staff, when you're coming in off the bench and you've got Kadeem, and now we got Ceedee in there, and Rantut, and Tamarcus Blanton, and Justin Mackey, and Hassani, and Rakim. Now you've got some depth where you come in, and those big guys they protect the guards, and those guards also protect the bigs. It's kind of a balance. Our bigs are protecting our guards right now defensively, and our guards are kind of protecting our bigs offensively. And eventually, that's where I get excited about our team. We're going to find a balance where our bigs get better on offense and our guards continue to get better on defense, and that's why I get excited about who we can become.
We're gonna move on, but I did want to give Coach Martin one opportunity.
Hey, how about that?
Comment on that real
Good
quick.
for him.
First career, he had one last year, I want to say, and 3 or 4 during his freshman year.
Good for him.
You want to talk about that? Sindarius being named?
Yeah, I'm ecstatic. I think he's the most unappreciated good player in the country. It's, we set a school record for wins. I'm going back to that again because I don't think anyone puts any value in that. School record for wins. He was a top 5 defender in the SEC based on what other coaches felt, which are the guys that actually compete against him. So that tells you what they think about him. And when you take in consideration the guys that coach in this league, they don't vote for people out of popularity. They're Final Four guys that vote for people that produce. He's played the 1 for us. He's played the 4 for us. He's played the 2. He leads us in scoring, leads us in rebounding, guards the best player on the other team. I think he's the most underappreciated good player in the country, and I'm ecstatic that he's been rewarded for his efforts this early in the year.
Coach, on Twitter, you've talked about some of the negativity of Castro's regime.
Mm-hmm.
What was your reaction to Castro's death?
To me, it was irrelevant. I mean, I don't wish on anyone to die. It was actually a moment, where I reflected on how lucky I am that I didn't have to live under his regime. I reflected on the struggles of my family, and they were with me in New York. To lose a grandfather, to lose half my family, to all those things which were negative things that took place when they took place. But I also reflected on what a great country I live in, that they took a family of people that didn't speak a lick of English and didn't give them anything for free, but gave them an opportunity to choose to work. And that I have an uncle who showed up on the docks of the Port of Miami as a 15-year-old to help his mother since his dad had passed away. And he started carrying boxes for a shipping company at the port after school, after he finished his high school day. And he went from a guy that carried boxes and loaded and unloaded ships to a guy that's very influential in the Port of Miami as we speak today. My parents met here in the United States, and my sister and I were fortunate to have been born here. And for a guy who learned English after he started school, not before he started school, that now I can lead the college program at an unbelievable institution like this one. It hasn't been easy, but it was an opportunity that where my parents left was not given to them. And so, it was great reflection. And I'm not saying I don't give hatred time. I can't live with hatred in my heart. That only consumes you in a negative way. Do I like anything he stood for? No. And anyone that applauds anything he was about is uneducated about him, not life, about him, and is completely wrong for doing so. Was he a good man? No. Was he a tyrant? Yes. Was he a murderer? Yes. Did I spend any time wishing him a bad fate? No. Have I hoped that he eliminated himself as a leader of Cuba? For many years, because of my grandmother, because I wanted her to rest in peace. Now she is resting in peace.
Coach, you just mentioned on it a little bit, talking about someone who ever speaks positively, Castro's uneducated. Colin Kaepernick had some comments that seemed to be in support of Castro. I know he came out yesterday saying that's not what he meant. What did you make of Colin Kaepernick's comments from earlier last week that talked about Castro?
Kaepernick can say whatever he wants to say. See, that's the beauty of this country. Colin Kaepernick in Cuba would have been put in jail. Here, he's allowed to express himself. That's why I love this country. We get to speak about whatever issues we don't like here. Think about this. I'm going to give you a little background on Cuba here, okay? Colin Kaepernick would have said what he said in Cuba, he would have put in jail. If he would not have stood when Castro decided to have his, what do you call it when the president addresses the country? the State of the Union. When Castro would have his State of the Union, they weren't for 45 minutes. He had one that went for 12 hours, spoke to the country for 12 consecutive hours. You had to stand there and listen to him for 12 hours. If you chose to take a knee while he was speaking, you go to jail. You know what he did in the late 70s? He created the Mariel boat lift. You know what he did? His jails were overcrowded because back in the 70s, he was still ruling a country that was filled with people that lived prior to his regime. So they understood life is different than the one that he's trying to falsely force upon them. Okay, so those people would upheave and they create uprisings. You know what he do? He put them in jail. When his jails were too packed, he created firing lines and killed people for going against what his government asked them to do. Well, as you keep going forward, in the late 70s, he said, well, I can't keep just killing people. How do I get all these people out of my jails? Well, he created the Mariel boat lift. He said, well, here's the deal. If you come, I'll let you take your family member with you. So all these people would drive their own boats across the Florida Straits. They show up at the Mariel harbor, and his government people would be there and saying, who are you? I'm so-and-so, and I'm here to pick up so-and-so. Okay, that's 25 grand. So it's 25,000 cash that you had to pay. And then for 25 grand, once you were there, he'd tell you, now here's the deal. If you don't pay me, I'm going to put him back in jail, and I'm going to beat the snot out of him every single day. Now, if you do pay me, you get to take him, but you don't get to take your cousin. You're taking these 3 other people, and you don't know who they were. Guess where those 3 people were? In jail. So he unloaded his prisons through the Mariel boat lift, and he made unbelievable amount of money. Can you imagine what that would do for our economy? If we would unload all our prisoners, our bad murderers, not the mass incarceration problem we have in our country with little petty stuff, but well, that's how he did it for everybody. And he created the Mariel boat lift himself and made it into a money-making machine by emptying his prisons and making money off allowing people to take 1 or 2 of their relatives back home. And that was a mass amount of people that came over, whatever year that was, 79, I was a kid back then. And that was my neighborhood. You know, in the movie Scarface, tents and all that stuff, that was my neighborhood. That's where I grew up. That was legit. Those scenes were legit. So, I don't know. Colin, that's the beauty of our country. He can say whatever he wants to say, and he has the right. The one part that we tend to forget around here in this country is we don't get put in jail for saying what we express, what we feel, but there are repercussions. Because if I'm an employee at the University of South Carolina, I can stand up and say whatever I want to say. The First Amendment right protects me from getting put in jail. That doesn't mean my employer is going to keep me hired. You know, it's 2 different animals, and we tend to forget that a little bit. But in this country, that's what makes this great for me, is that we can express ourselves. We can go on social media like I did last night, and I wasn't arguing like I told Matt Figure. Matt says, man, I said, I wasn't arguing. I was putting down facts. I was just making statements because it bothers me when people that are uneducated about Castro, not uneducated as people, about Castro, make comments making him be a good human being, something that he's not. And all you have to do is read. Google his name and put murder next to his name and read the stuff that comes out. And can you imagine that's only the stuff that's gotten out? When you're in a government like his where he controlled the message, everything that came out was totally controlled by him. Can you imagine the truth when it starts coming out now that he's gone?
Last question to John.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I want to be sure I understand this right. I read that you made a promise to your grandmother that you wouldn't go back to Cuba until Castro was out of power. Is that accurate? And also, is that a place where you would like to visit now?
I know that country through my family's eyes. I don't know it through my own eyes. I think I'll be sad if I see the country, what it looks like now, compared to what it looked like the way it was described to me from my family. But yes, eventually, I'd like to do what my grandmother and my grandfather on both sides were never able to do before their death, is go back to their country and see it. I'd like to be able to do that. An opportunity that was taken away from both of them, from all four of them, excuse me. I'd like to be able to do that. And I'd like for my uncle and my mother to go see where they lived at, where they were born at. I'd like for them to be able to experience that one last time, you know. But with all that said, the one thing I don't ever want to confuse is my family, just like the people who live in Cuba now have been, I don't even know, I'm going to create a word here. They've been castricized. I don't know if that sounds bad. But they don't know life other than the regime that they lived under. They got nothing to compare it to. They don't have internet. They don't get social media. They got no idea how people live anywhere other than the ones that have relatives in this country or whatever country and they're allowed to communicate to. They got no idea the freedoms that people live in other countries. They're like I tell our players, I don't believe in putting them in a cage, because if you do, then when they go out to real life, they're going to make mistakes, and they don't know how to handle mistakes. I got to let them live, and I'm going to have to teach them through their mistakes. Well, people in Cuba don't understand how other people live. Well, my family's Americanized. We're proud Americans. My family, their heritage, their home, their land, that's very dear to them and me. Being able to go back and seeing that is very important. But make no mistake about it now. I am a proud citizen of USA, of the United States of America, and I want to do everything in my power to help this country continue to get better.